The way they determine these ratings is quite scientific. Actually, I'm an engineer by training, so of course I read the standard one time, and it's very well defined. It's they put a mannequin in. A special mannequin that has sensors or whatever, and they put the mannequin in the bag and they record a whole bunch of things, and then the rating is established based on the comfort rating is someone who is equivalent to somebody who can sleep in a normal position without having to be in a fetal position to conserve heat. And the lower comfort rating is assumed that the person in that you and I are in the fetal position when it's a little bit extra colder or whatever. It's quite interesting.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. If you can afford the weight, get a lower rating and get more loft and be comfortable.
You won't even necessarily, like when I first get in my tent at night, I'm like, I don't need this, it's fine. But it's that 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. sort of hour where you wake up and you're and just wherever there's been holes in your sleeping system, the cold is permeated into it, and you're certainly feeling it.
Well, and it's also biological. Somebody explained it to me, but around 3:30, 4 a.m. is the time when our body, something's happening to our body, and it's switching from sleep mode, getting ready to go back to wake up mode, and it's shifting where the heat is going and the blood flow and things like that. And so it's not uncommon to be cold right around 4 in the morning. Wow. There's a biological. If somebody wants to explain it to us, put it in the comments. Yeah. But I've experienced it. I know
it's consistent.
It's consistent. All of a sudden I get a chill and I'm like, whoa. And then I go, 4 o'clock. Yeah.
I can get a great sleep when I'm hiking up until that time. And then after that, it's tossing and turning until the sun comes
and
up.
for me, I'll have a little bag of almonds or peanuts nearby. And you guys that are in the tent nearby will hear the crumpling maybe. And that's Marty popping just a handful of peanuts. Just something to get the heat going in the stomach again.
Yeah. It's something you gotta really take in consideration. My last night on the Pacific Crest Trail back in 2018, we were walking with summer equipment through winter conditions, and I ended up at the top of a pass when it was -5, -6 at night with a wet sleeping bag and wet sleeping clothes. And could have built a fire, be the one option. The other option is I had all my food, ate food all night long, and just clenched all night long, and it was a brutal night. But if you're in that position,
I think many of us have been there. I've been there in the same boat where eventually, you just give up and you make a shelter and you retreat to your shelter, and that's it. That's the safest thing to do.
And just curl up and everything ends.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things I wanted to bring up with you is I don't know how bad it's gotten for you, but how do you get through the tough parts of hiking? And wherever that tough part may be for you, if it's a long uphill or been away from home for a while, like what do you fall back on?
To be honest, so the toughest parts of hiking for me are long distances and hills. Hills. I don't like hills. Nobody likes hills. but for me, it's experience. And a weird factor is I've learned to sort of look over at a distance and know how long I'm going to be there. And I just tell myself. So an example was when we did Quartzite Pass. Mm-hmm. When you look at that wall going up, for somebody who's never done any hiking, that wall's terrible. But when I look at that wall and I equate that wall with other similar walls. So I've done so many hikes that I can find another hike like it in my mind. So when I'm looking at that wall, I go, that's no different than the Castlegar wall. Mm-hmm. And I climbed that in an hour. So I just tell myself, in an hour, I'll be on top.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and any sort of suffering you're feeling in that moment,
it's just reminding myself that I've been through all of these events, and that the next event will come. I will get over the obstacle. But it also helps, it helps because you and I have been hiking a long time. It helps for me to have enough confidence in my skills to know that no matter what, if I needed to stop right here and set up camp, I could.
Yeah.
But also knowing that if I have to, that when I go to set up camp in an hour from now, it doesn't stress me out. And that's the other thing is that goes for life in general. Stay in that moment. So the problem at this moment is the hill. So don't start thinking about what's on the other side of the hill, setting up camp tonight, making dinner, where am I going to sleep, where am I going to find camp. Worry about the moment, the problem in the moment, mm-hmm. and deal with that one.
Yes, that's great advice. Absolutely.
Yeah. But otherwise, I've had a lot of hard days, and you get through the hard days by one foot in front of the other.
So Marty's a little infamous in our group, at least, for he has a you have your little Garmin for your route finding, right? But you have no connectivity abilities for calling out.
No, and the Garmin I use is just a small a pure GPS, that I bring on the odd hike. I seldom bring it now. Yeah.
So we've sort of discussed it before, but I'm interested. A lot of people ask me, like, what happens if you get hurt in the backcountry? What if an injury where you can't walk out? If you break a leg, or you severely break an arm, or you hit your head, what is your plan, and what are your contingencies that are put in place?
Yeah. So I approach almost each hike as I do a bit of a risk analysis of each hike, but basically at the core is my skills, the equipment I bring, and then a plan that I file with somebody. Mm-hmm. So I have a wife, so Karen, I file the plan with Karen. We talked about that. You have to have somebody, so I appreciate that you list me as a resource in your plan, mm-hmm. because we were we'll come back to that one, because I want to talk about ISIS and the GPS and the false security that can provide. But basically, I file a plan, and the best thing that can happen to me is I get hurt on the last day, and they'll start coming to look for me near the end. Mm-hmm. The worst thing that can happen to me is if I get hurt on the first day, mm-hmm. and
especially if like a 6, 7, or 8 day hike.
Then they're going to wait, and I always file my plan and tell my wife, if I'm planning to come out on Tuesday, don't panic until Wednesday. So the worst that would happen to me is I have to be able to be on my own for an extended period of time. Mm-hmm. The longest I've exposed myself are 9-10 days in deep wilderness. Mm-hmm. But it's, for me, it's a long-term experience. I mean, the connectivity, the satellite devices didn't exist for the first 20 years, mm-hmm. 25 years of my hiking.
And I think we've discussed before that is a huge attraction to me, is that the phone doesn't work anymore. Like you cannot talk to other people, and it's almost a fasting in a way.
I hike because I don't want to talk to other people, or other than the people that are with me, and even then I hike alone a lot. Mm-hmm. I hike because I want to challenge myself, and I hike because I want to reconnect with a certain way of doing things. So I'm very old school, and I get criticized a lot for not bringing a Garmin type device. Mm-hmm. And that's not an argument that we're going to win or lose. It's a personal choice. It's purely a personal choice, and I'll live with the consequences. And my wife's used to it. Karen's used to it. Karen doesn't get nervous when I'm gone.
Yeah.
I'm sure she gets a little nervous, but after 35 years,
you've done it so many times.
I've done it so many times. But I want to get back to a point. So it's not a criticism. It's just a lesson. When we were at we went to Pinto Lake, and James brought ISIS, and then ISIS just wasn't in the mood to finish the hike, so we brainstormed possibilities, and we decided to activate one of these SOS devices, and then we were all sitting around the campfire going, who do we call? Mm-hmm. Who do we call? Because it's not an emergency where we're dialing 911 and just come and get me. Who do we call? And I remember saying, well, don't call Karen, because she wouldn't know. She only knows to call the rescue guys and come look for me. Mm-hmm. She doesn't know something that's a bit of an alternative, and the alternative there is we weren't in a rescue situation. We just wanted
we weren't in the park either.
We wanted to charter a helicopter basically and fly out. So who did we end up calling?
It was oh my goodness.
It was a buddy of a buddy.
It was James's buddy
who kind of knew the area, and we felt confident that if we texted him a limited text, that he would be able to figure it out. Mm-hmm. But anyways, long story short, if you're carrying one of these devices, you better practice with it and have a proper plan of, if I activate it, who do I contact?
There's a series of questions. It's like, well, how many people? What are the injuries? I mean,
where are you?
Well, I guess that information doesn't come out unless you. Oh no, you'd be on the other side.
It depends. It depends. But and we're not going to single out. I mean, we're singling out a GP or a Garmin safety device or a Spot, but that applies for anything. I mean, if you're going to go into backcountry, mm-hmm. I'm anal about the words where people say we're testing our gear. I'm like, no, you're not testing your gear. Your gear's been tested when it was designed. What you're doing is you're familiarizing yourself with gear, mm-hmm. and that's a slightly different idea. You should always be familiar with the gear you're using. Mm-hmm. Always.
No,
and a device, a safety device is no different.
Yeah, absolutely. The gear you take out there, it's always evolving, always changing.
I mean, I've seen people who don't know how to use their filter, don't know how to use their stove. Today's less common, right? Because you got that. But remember the good old days on MSR Whisper Light, and you'd see somebody struggling to pump it and assemble it, and be like, okay.
Yeah, back in the day when everything was so
setting
much
up
heavier.
your tent. Oh, you're guilty of that one on the tent. I'm laughing now because remember you came out and we had that tent, and we're like, where does this?
You
pole,
weren't able to figure it out though.
Where does this pole go?
No, yeah, and I ended up finding out where it was. Okay, and you haven't heard about this yet. You're gonna bust my balls on this one too. I did the rock wall in October, and left my tent poles at Numa Creek.
Did you go back or did you?
I didn't discover it till I unpacked my bag like 3 days later.
Did you get it back?
Nope. No.
Oh, that's too bad.
No, I put a little post up on the rock wall thing. No responses, unfortunately.
They're still there.
If anyone is at Numa Creek and sees my gray tent poles, I will happily give you a reward. If you find them there, if they're in the bear cab.
Don't even say what tent they fit, because if somebody's got a broken pole, they might go look for them. Oh man, what's the craziest gear you've ever found on the trail? You ever find gear?
I found when I was in California, I found like a $200 hunting knife. Yeah. Just it was on someone's belt and fell off, and it was just there. I carried it for 2 days, asking people, "Hey, is this yours?" Yeah. At a certain point, I gave it to a guy for hitchhiking to town.
On the Brazil, I've found many bear sprays over the year, and I remember on the Brazil loop near the end, coming back from Brazil and between Brazil and 4 Points, I found a bear spray. And so I had 2 bear spray, and then coincidentally, about the second or third group I met shortly afterwards had no bear spray, and I noticed it, and I made a comment. And I'm like, you guys don't have a bear spray? No, they had flown in, they couldn't get one, whatever. I'm like, it's your lucky day. I just didn't want to carry it out.
It amazes me how many people, like I saw on
Which
the skyline.
Which is another thing I was guilty of. I went decades without bear spray. And I finally, after doing a proper risk analysis, I realized that the bear spray is a small way to mitigate a pretty big risk.
Well, Marty, lead into one of my other questions here. Why don't you carry a gun? You've shown me all of your guns. You certainly know how to use them.
Oh, that's straightforward. I mean, there's two quick answers. A, it's illegal in most places we go. You cannot have. I hear Americans ask that question all the time. Don't come to Canada with your gun. You do not, in a national park in Canada, no firearms. You can't even drive through the park with a firearm unless it's cased and disassembled. So none in the firearm. So where does that leave the places where I could carry a firearm? Kananaskis country and some of the Crown land. I've seen people bring shotguns there, and I'd say no. A small firearm, by the time you can do more harm than good with it. I just don't. Bring a bear spray.
The bear spray substitutes are almost all the needs.
And the bear spray is a last resort, because you should prevent that incident long before then. You have situational awareness. You should know the surroundings you're in. You should recognize signs that there might be a bear in the area. If there isn't, there's seasons, the fruits, the scats, the territory, everything. So the bear spray is an extreme last defense. Mm-hmm. And if you're getting to that extreme last defense, a handgun is a brutal last resort. Yeah. And I also just don't want to know. I want to know that I'm not out there with anybody else who has a gun. Mm-hmm. So leave your firearms at home.
I'm a young woman. I've heard some scary trails out there, or scary stories out there on the trail. Like, I really think I should have a gun if I'm a young woman out there. I mean, isn't there some dangerous characters out there at all?
I've never encountered any, and I would say if you're at that point, then hike with a friend.
There you go. Right.
Yeah. No, I can't find a scenario where I would say bring a firearm.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All
and
right.
and one time I met a guy with a firearm, and it isn't. And I practice firearm sports. I mean, I shoot competitively, and I have firearms. And to come across somebody on a hiking trail who had a shotgun made me nervous.
And how was he carrying it?
He just had it in his pack,
yeah.
And I'm just thinking literally, like, it's useless. It's completely, you've carried 7 pounds that, what are you going to do? Do the old Rambo thing? No, dude, you know, and even the bear spray, that's another one that you better learn how to use your bear spray.
So
discharge your bear spray.
So can I pull mine off, I can pop the cap off, and I can just test practice it a couple times?
You can, and it'll reseal, so you can do one quick squirt. You know, they're good for about 8 seconds.
8 seconds, okay.
So I know from experience I've squirted them accidentally.
Yeah.
Many times.
I think I may have froze mine on a trail. Is it now done? Useless? Can I test it?
If it's not leak, you could weigh it on a little scale and see how much stuff is in there. You know what I would say, because it's such a key piece, buy a new one.
Yeah.
Buy a new one.
Now, I do have the new one now, but now I have this old one which I can test. I can
test
maybe
the old
practice
one
with it.
And we live, self-promotion. I have a video where I tried one in winter. Try it out in the winter because you get to see the spray on the snow, and you'll get a really great appreciation of how far they shoot and what pattern it is. And trust me, it's a means of defense of the last second. I mean, it is that bear has to be on you and you're firing it. You don't.
35 years of hiking, how many times has a bear charged you?
Only one that scared the shit out of me.
And it was a false charge? You didn't have to use your bear spray?
It was a bluff. I was reaching for the spray and I was, forgive my French, screwed. I mean, I was reaching, falling backwards, and it was too late. It was too late. I was dead, and he bluffed.
Yeah. Wow.
He turned around, did the largest, just a big snort, and then turned around and buggered off. And I was hiking with a friend, Laurent, and we both looked at each other.
Oh, was that the bear story?
Yeah.
Where Laurent was just like, bear?
Yeah. He yelled. I was in front of him. We were just talking, and he just yelled bear. And when somebody says bear, usually I'm expecting to have them point and look over the horizon somewhere, and I turn as like, holy cow. And I was just reaching, and it was too late. Like, if he hadn't stopped, he was knocking one of us down.
Jeez.
And shame on me, because and perhaps an hour earlier I'd seen a pile of scat on the trail. Now, an hour earlier is a long ways away still, but he's territorial. So I remember seeing a big pile of scat, 3-4 kilometers away, and thinking, boy, I hope we don't come across this big boy, because it was big. And we did.
Yeah.
And he got us in a classic situation, which was we were doing everything we're supposed to. We were talking very loud, and we were aware that he might be in the area, but we were maybe 500 yards from the river, from the Chava River, and the noise of the river meant that he couldn't hear us and we couldn't hear him. And we spooked him.
Consistently, it's the areas around rivers that are loud seems to be where the most encounters are.
Or coming around a bend, or I mean, I've videotaped lots of bears. I mean, you come around, they're far over the distance, and I've had many times in my life, not many times, but certainly 3-4 times where I've had the bear spray in my hands, and I have a bear there, and they tend to turn around.
They usually leave you alone, folks.
They leave you alone.
Yeah, it's usually when that happens.
I hope, it's off to hike I go. I hope, it's off to hike I go. I hope,